Welcome back to Inclusion Revolution here on Eastlink Television, and you're joining Tova and Paul, and today we're talking about the Business for Tomorrow Conference, a true example of how the Inclusion Revolution can work in our community. Just before we broke, I know, Paul, we were talking about some of the sessions that are coming up and how they address some of the issues that were brought up by employers. Can you tell me some of the other challenges or some of the questions that might have come up so we can address them or identify them?
Yeah, I guess one of them was the employers asking, will they be able to connect to other employers? Will they be able to connect to other employers who have hired persons with disabilities to get a first-hand knowledge on the process and how it works and what has worked and what hasn't worked?
Well, you know, it's interesting you mentioned that, because one of the concerns I've had at every conference I've ever attended, including the ones I mentioned on this very subject or close to it out west, and that is they never provide time for people to meet each other. And I believe networking, especially when you've got model employers, right, to keep them away from the employers who are curious or concerned or unsure and want to do the right thing but don't know what that means, is counterproductive.
Right.
So I know part of the day is to not only incorporate or ensure there's breakout and opportunity to meet each other, but I do believe that there's also a Business for Tomorrow employer panel.
Yes.
Now, the panel, I understand, is being moderated by Janice Ainsworth, who's the Executive Director of Teamwork Cooperative, a very fine entry point for employment for persons with disabilities in this community. But most importantly, the employers themselves who have been successes, and it's my understanding that the oh my gosh, help me out here, Paul, because I know there's a great crew coming on the employers panel.
There's Danny Morton.
Danny Morton, who, in addition to being the chairman of the Tourism Industry Association of Nova Scotia and one of our partners on this conference, but also I know Danny's proprietor out at the White Point Lodge,
yes,
where my husband likes the ping pong table. So thanks for the ping pong table, Danny. But the point is that Danny will be sitting on, again, and someone who can talk about what his community is doing to support and incorporate inclusive employment for persons with disabilities.
Exactly.
In addition to Danny, who'll be representing, I know, the hospitality industry to some extent, I believe the Halifax International Airport Authority,
yes,
who's also a real leader in inclusion of persons with disabilities in their hiring and in their practices and in their outreach. I'm especially impressed with how they outreach to community agencies. They'll be there to talk about some of the strategies they're using.
Right.
And also Department of National Defense. It's my understanding that's actually an HR director from Toronto will be coming for this conference.
Correct.
Because Department of National Defense is facing a large gap in civilian hirings. Mm-hmm. And as a result, I know they're being very aggressive and very creative in how they're including persons with disabilities in the hiring and retaining process. Mm-hmm. So I think the employer panel is really going to address that concern about reaching out to employers who are doing it and getting an opportunity to speak to them about it. And then any gaps around how do I find this or how do I find that person, we've got Janice right there, who's really a key community person who can put a lot of information in their hands as well. So I think that the way they've decided to do the employer panel and the amount of networking time they've provided for people to meet each other is crucial and, again, revolutionary in how this conference is being run, and for that I'm very, very grateful. So I think that that's going to be addressed, you know, in a really clever way.
And it's also interesting that the representatives on the panel come from a variety of different backgrounds. That is not all of them from the hospitality industry, it's not all from and the crossover information, people think that hiring someone within the hospitality industry and hiring someone at D&D might be a completely different process, but a lot of the elements are exactly the same.
Right, and I think that'll come out as well in the panel. I agree with you there. But what I love is the fact that we're going to have this bulk of time for each panelist to talk about what their successes and challenges may have been, but why they're taking this road of inclusion, and then allowing the employers to face them with their challenges and hear more about solutions, because it really is, you know, Inclusion Revolution is about successes and strategies, and that Business for Tomorrow conference really reflects that, which is why, of course, as you know, I'm one of the speakers at the conference. Anyone who watches the show or knows me personally knows I could never miss a conference like that, because it's really what I've always believed, again, that we inspire persons with disabilities, but we are inspiring the other side, the employer and the hirers, and teaching them some of the basic concepts, which is, in the old days, it was all about screening out.
Exactly.
That day is gone. We need to start screening in. We need to start thinking about people with disabilities having more tools, and that's part of one of the misconceptions or myths that's out there, that they can't do certain things.
Right.
IT, I've called many times the great equalizer, and I really believe that our community of employers needs to realize that what you thought 10 years ago a person with disability could or could not manage in a job description is very different than today, because of the prevalence of assistive devices, creativity, of Of course, IT, as I've talked about, and a number of other, even just improvements in medications and holistic health approaches and preventative.
And even communication, the end of isolation. You know, with technology and using it as a communicative device for employers, employees, the social networking and et cetera. But it's very important. It's really opened the door and opened the ability of information that people can gather, and it's leveling the field among employers and employees that's resulting in more hiring practices, better practices happening. And as we move forward, it's interesting. This conference is so important because it really is bringing the best practices together and examining what is being done and what can be done.
Absolutely. And I know there's a few other things happening at the conference that I have to mention just to show that sort of holistic approach to the conference. Again, IDEA, or Independent Disability Education Associates, which is disabilityeducation.ca, if you want to check out the website for disability awareness training, is doing a keynote piece on hiring and retaining persons with disabilities. Doesn't matter what your industry is, some basic concepts, because a lot of people will hire, but it's the retention piece that's really challenging. And as I've spoken before to you, Paul, and in the future I'll be talking about on the show, and that is the reality that it costs about 35% of an annual salary to replace a person, to retrain. Retention makes sense. And I've always believed the right person for the right job, and I don't believe we put a circle into a square. It's not good for the individual, and frankly it's not good for the employer, and it creates the very stigmas we're trying to avoid, which is, oh, that person couldn't do it. Well, that person shouldn't be in the job, whether they have a disability or not.
Right.
So I believe that this Business for Tomorrow conference on March 30th at the World Training Convention Center, that is being put on by Reachability, is a very important step in the inclusion revolution, the concept of engaging not just people with disabilities. I think a lot of people with disabilities get the issues, but including the whole community and making everybody part of that solution. And I think that this conference certainly offers that. And I know that Reachability has some key goals with their business partners as to what they hope that this conference will come out with. Perhaps you could share a few, because I don't know them other than what I think there should be.
Right.
What are they saying they should be?
I think an overall goal would be employers getting an understanding of how to, like we're saying, how to attract a diverse staff.
Screening in, not screening out.
Exactly. You know, we talked about how to keep the staff they have. Because, like we're saying, it costs more to hire someone new than it does to work with the existing
And oftentimes, you know, accommodation or retention is much simpler than we think. Another one of the myths I know is that people think accommodation is this dirty, scary word that's going to cost them their second mortgage, when in fact, according again to DuPont studies, the majority of accommodations are under $500.
Wow.
So, you know, this perception of, oh my gosh, $10,000 later you're going to be accommodated is again one of those myths that I know will be addressed in Christopher Bork's presentation.
Exactly. Another big goal that we hope to achieve from the conference is also educational opportunity, how to connect with community organizations.
Thank you for saying that, because that's one of the elements of the show the conference we haven't talked about, and that is the trade show element. There will be some key members of the Disability Employment Agency community that will be there, and one of the last parts of the day is a round table where agency people from Reachability, speakers will all be at the tables and allowing the employers to rotate. So I think that's a fantastic opportunity. So just because we've got to take a break shortly, I want to let everyone know when we come back, Paul and I are going to wrap up on the conference and let you know a little bit about this week's poll of the week and some of the breaking medical news. We'll see you in just a moment.